It's such a treat to write to Celebrations Pulse every week because it begins a conversation that we have with you that I really appreciate and enjoy. And you know that we have our Amazing Moms program, and we get so many letters and so many notes about all the amazing moms. What I'm tickled by with Amazing Moms is how many moms are nominating their daughters because they think their daughters are amazing moms. But in this season, it's all about amazing dads. And at the Celebrations Pulse, we get a lot of stories about amazing dads. And I'd like to share one with you now. A lady named Rochelle wrote to me, and she said, my dad was in his 20s, married with 3 children, all under 4, and had been in the military for less than 2 years when her mom, his wife, decided she couldn't handle it and she left. In an instant, she describes how her father was engrossed in a very different form of fatherhood that he anticipated, and his family situation was a lot different than he had imagined or dreamt about. But he sucked it up. He did the right thing. He just kept moving forward. He changed careers. He worked tirelessly and never stopped moving forward. He wasn't perfect, but when many people might have walked away, Rochelle tells us he stayed and just kept going. Over the course of 40 years with the same company, he worked his way up from janitor to a senior leadership position. Quite amazing. She said he taught us lessons about resilience, about hard work, kindness, perseverance, and without ever saying a word about woe's me. I cannot imagine how difficult those early years were, she tells me, but I'll always be grateful for his strength and for the example he set. She said, thank you, Dad, for teaching us to work hard, make the best of every situation, and never, never give up. When I hear of Rochelle's story about her dad and the work he did to overcome the fact that here he was, just in his 20s, 3 kids, all under 4, and all of a sudden his wife couldn't take it and left, boy, did his world change. But I think the lessons we hear there from Rochelle about her dad, I reflect personally and say, how lucky am I that I had a great partner, still do. Mary Lou's been my partner for a lot of years, and the fact that she was there all the time, never complaining about when things weren't going great. She stepped in a lot of the time when I couldn't be there. I've told my kids that I feel bad that I missed a lot of things with them because I was working. They say they didn't really notice. I did, but Mary Lou was always there, so that blended it throughout. So I think recognizing the fact that there are amazing dads, we don't all have to think of ourselves as amazing. I don't. But if we're in there all the time and we're showing the right lessons and we have the right motivation and we keep on trying, who knows? Maybe we'll do something amazing. I have a nice letter here from Eileen telling us about her amazing dad. She said, growing up, my family life wasn't always easy. There were emotional, financial, and personal challenges. And like many children, I felt the tension that came with that right there in our home. But through it all, my dad gave me a gift that I'll never forget. He traveled a lot for work, but when he was home, I knew I had a friend, she says. I knew I had a friend. He never raised his voice to me. He never took his frustrations out on me. In the middle of a very difficult situation, he always chose kindness. Looking back, I realized he taught me something powerful. Our circumstances don't have to determine who we are. She says at the end, thank you, Dad. You were the sugar in my lemonade of life. What a nice way of putting it. I think it's an interesting lesson in here we learned from Eileen about her dad is that when we always have a choice. We have a choice of how we're going to respond to things, how we're going to respond to people. And I think if we can train ourselves to make kindness our instinctual response, our lives will be better and the lives of the people around us will be better. I had occasion to be at a graduation recently for my grandson who graduated from the 8th grade, or some people would call it middle school. And they did something very nice. It was a small class, so each homeroom teacher presented a diploma to each of the students. And they came up and stood on stage, and the teacher then would give remarks about that student before he or she would come over and receive their diploma, get their picture taken, exit the stage. And the constant I heard throughout those comments were the people who were thoughtful, and they pointed this out in so many cases, the students who did something thoughtful for somebody else, who was generous with their spirit, who was going out of their way to make other people feel comfortable, using their power to change how other people felt. They had done a program where a school of children, all of whom had autism, came and spent a day. I think it was in early May. And so many teachers cited students who were graduating and how they went out of the way to seek out people from the other school who came to visit them, to make them feel comfortable, how some of them had planned activities and brought games or things that they thought the students would like. They said that the kids in the bus on the way home from the school for children with autism, that the conversation was all about, when do we come back? I saw in my grandson his kindness. I saw in so many of his classmates their kindness. And I think I left there yesterday saying, here's a bunch of kids who are going to have a pretty good life. And they're going to have a pretty good life because they have a real sensitivity to the needs and concerns of other people. And they were generous in spirit to share their kindness. I have a nice note here from Kit. Kit tells us about her dad and their special relationship. And when I say that, there's nothing grand in here, but it shows you how you build relationships and you find your special little ways to connect. I've shared stories with you about my lessons working in St. John's Home for Boys, how I had to go out of my way to find a way to build a bridge, build a special way of connecting with each of the boys in our care. That you don't build relationships with groups, you build relationships with individuals. So let me share a kid's story with you. She said her memory of growing up with Dad was that every morning he would have breakfast at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and read over the local newspaper. And she'd often sit next to him, Kit would, and it came to a point where he got to the comic section in the newspaper. Believe it or not, there used to be newspapers and there used to be comics in those newspapers. Maybe in some places there still are. But that he would take one comic in particular that he thought was funny, that she would enjoy, and he started to share that with her. Well, that became their thing. And they started sharing comics. And he said even when she went off to college, all of a sudden she'd get an envelope and nothing more than a cutout of the newspaper, a comic strip that he wanted to share with her. She said even after she got into the workforce, that was their thing. They would send their favorite comic strips to one another. It just let them each know that they had a special bond, a special relationship. And it can be quirky, and you can find your special way too. With my grandkids, each of them has gotten a nickname that I use with them all the time. And it just lets them know that I have a special thought about each of them. And recently yesterday at a family gathering, I called my 12-year-old granddaughter by her name. And she looked at me. She says, "What happened to my nickname?" And I realized that it means something to them, that they each have their own identity beyond their name, their nickname, and the funny way it developed. So we should go out of our way. Now, Kit tells me that her dad has been gone for 15 years now, but she saved all those comic strips that they shared over the years. It just tells you how deep those bonds go. Use your power. Find a special way to have special connections, which lead to special relationships. It's in your power. Let me tell you, share a story here with a letter I received from Kathleen about her amazing dad. She said her dad was a regular dad. He did what dads were supposed to do. He worked long, he worked hard, he provided for his family, and he commuted an hour each way to his work for more than 30 years. He always shared with them, though, that he had a dream. They lived in Southern California, and he dreamed of sailing a sailboat across the Pacific. They never were quite sure that he really wanted to do it, but he had the dream and shared and prepared. He bought a 36-foot sailboat, and he worked on it, and he researched what he would need, and it was his vision and dream. Kathleen was never really sure. She was an only child, by the way. she was never really sure that he would really sail, but it was his passion, his hobby, his interest, and something the whole family shared as he talked about it and prepped. Well, lo and behold, he retired, and right after Kathleen got married, he decided it was time to leave the dock. And he set sail on his Pacific crossing with all his preparation in place. She had worked with it on a bunch of preparation. And she said to her husband, "Why don't we go along?" So she and her husband set sail. Her mom didn't. She suffered from severe seasickness. But they went on that journey. And she says it was a trip of a lifetime. We crossed oceans, watched breathtaking sunrises, endured rough seas, and experienced places we could never have imagined. But the greatest gift was watching his dream become a reality. So Kathleen tells us that her father's dream finally came true, a dream she wasn't sure he would ever really take, but he provided for his family. Then when she was married, he had the opportunity, he said he was going to do it. Their mom would fly and meet them at different ports of call around the world. They had the most amazing experience. The really sad part of the story, though, is only a year after they returned, at only 62 years old, he passed. But Kathleen says those lessons, more than 40 years later, after he passed, reminds her that the lesson she learned from him was to have dreams, share those dreams, do the right thing, make sure you provide for everyone else. Don't pursue your dreams at the expense of other people. But when your time comes, it's a good idea to leave the dock. Wonderful stories there. I think sharing dreams is an important lesson we learned from Kathleen's story about her dad, being supportive, willing to take an adventure. How about our husband said, "Wait a minute, we just got married and now we're going to sail around the world on a 36-foot sailboat with your dad." How brave he was, she was, they were to take that journey together. I'm sure it impacted them for the rest of their lives, as is evidenced by Kathleen telling us that 40 years after that, it's still the most powerful memory she has. Her dad, his dreams, and her sharing them and seeing them come true for him. Wow, here's a powerful story. I got a letter from Diana telling me about an amazing dad. That amazing dad? Hassan Aaron, who served in the Marine Corps in Iraq. And in 2005, the vehicle he was riding in was hit by an IED, and he was terribly injured. He's experienced more than 70 surgeries, challenges that would have caused most people to give up. He didn't give up. In fact, he's the father of two, and he raised those children himself because the pressure was too much on his wife. Diana tells me that her son, while a single dad, continued to serve others. He spent years supporting wounded veterans, speaking at events, and helping others navigate their own journeys. Despite everything he endured, he had never stopped showing up. And I think that's a theme we hear throughout here on all these amazing dads. It just keeps showing up. And as his mother, I watched him meet hardships with courage, responsibilities, and grace. And people often call Aaron a hero because of his military service. Diana says, "I call him a hero because of the father, leader, and man he chose to become." What a story. And she says, "And I'm incredibly proud to be his mother." What life lessons there from Aaron's story that Diana shared with us. We've met so many people, particularly in the veterans community, who have experienced incredible hardship. We've had some amazing people on the Celebrations podcast who've shared their stories. You can't help but be proud and amazed at the grace, faith often, I would say almost always, a strong sense of faith, and a realization that in spite of the challenges that seem apparent to all of us, that they have the resilience, courage, grace, and kindness to say, I can serve others, and that will be my mission, and that will be how I'm fulfilled in the service of others. We don't recognize enough the sacrifice that veterans have made for us over the years, but I think we also don't appreciate the role that fathers play, and I think we as fathers sometimes don't appreciate the role we play in shaping others' lives, Showing up is something we hear about all the time. Kindness is something we hear about all the time. And just being there and finding a way to make a special connection with your children, with their friends, with other people in the community who are of service to your children. It's a lot of responsibility, but if you're open and honest and sharing, you might be an amazing dad too. You know, it's been over 40 years now that we've been doing the Amazing Mom program, and I'm so glad we're now expanding that to amazing dads and amazing teachers and amazing nurses. I think I love the word amazing, but I don't want it to distract us from the idea that it doesn't have to be extraordinary. Sometimes being amazing is just consistently showing up, being understanding, being thoughtful, being kind. So there's lots of different ways of being amazing. And it's not for us to judge who's amazing. It's for others to judge who's amazing in their world. And we're so happy to hear your stories about all the amazing dads in your life. Certainly we're overwhelmed with all these stories of amazing moms. And our mission is just to share the idea that if we're conscious and thoughtful about what our role is in life, could be as a friend, could be a father, mother, nurse, teacher, whatever our role is, that we should strive to be conscious at least of the impact that we can have on others, that we have a power, whether we choose to recognize it or not, use it or not, to change how other people feel. I was at a graduation recently, and my favorite quote was from Maya Angelou, who said, "People will." It was quoted on stage by the valedictorian at a recent graduation I went to. Maya Angelou told us that people will not remember what you said, they will not remember what you did. They will only remember how you made them feel. So if you want to be amazing, if you want to be an amazing friend, dad, mom, teacher, nurse, friend, be conscious of what you do and say, because it's going to impact how someone else feels. You can use that for good. And it doesn't have to be grand, but it can all be amazing.